Welcome, everybody. Good to see you all. For those of you that know me, you know me. For those of you that I haven't met before, my name is Francisco Servent. I am the owner of Keystone Law Firm and Lifestyle Planning, estate planning attorney, financial advisor, helping people since 2007 with this stuff. And we are going to spend a little bit of time today going over what are, I think, some of the important things to know with regards to protecting yourself from lawsuits and things like that. And that's going to be the focus for today. Before I jump in, though, I do just want to remind everybody of a couple quick things. So this is being recorded. And so we will also be sharing this recording on our YouTube channel. If you have questions today, I welcome them. I'm going to have some time to open it up, open up the mics, open up the chat for questions, and I'm happy to answer any of them right here, right now. Just remember, this is being recorded and it's going to be shared on our YouTube channel for anybody to watch. So if you do ask a question, keep it generic, keep it hypothetical, in a way that doesn't reveal more than you want to reveal. But a lot of times you can just kind of phrase it in a way that's pretty generic, I hope. But if you've missed any of our webinars that we've done this year, I welcome you to go to our YouTube channel and check them out. They're all there. It's pretty easy to find at youtube.com/Keystone Law Firm. And you'll see there we've got one of our lists is all of these longer form webinars. So you can watch them directly. You can watch them over and over. You can learn and learn and learn as much as you want. You're welcome to share them with somebody. If the topic comes up with a friend of yours, a family member, and you think, this might apply to you, you're welcome to share that, obviously. These webinars are open to the public. So some of you are clients, some of you are not, some of you are never met us before. If you look at our invitations for the ones that are coming up and you see something relevant for a friend or a colleague, feel free to pass it along. These are not exclusive or limited. We have a lot of bandwidth on this to add people, so feel free to do that. You can drop questions in the chat anytime you want. I will do my best to try to catch them as I go, but if I don't catch them as I go, I will have time before we finish up to make sure we cover those questions. And before we finish this one today, I'll point you to the topic that we're doing next time on October 24th. So I'll invite you guys. That one's a little bit different. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that one as we get to it. Today is really focused on one little sliver of a topic. I'm going to go as deep as I can in about 40 minutes or so on this topic to help, I think, frame what could otherwise be seen as a big, complicated cobweb of information. I hope to organize it in a way that somebody who owns some rental properties, somebody who has some wealth saved up in brokerage or investments or businesses can kind of figure out which pieces make sense and how it might apply to you, your situation, your family. Obviously, I don't know that all of it will apply to all of you, but I hope at least all of you will walk away with one or two nuggets and go, oh, that was helpful. I now get it, why I need to learn more about this piece or that piece or something. So that's my goal with this. The topic is, what is that sort of next level of asset protection when you're thinking about protecting your stuff, right? We all are either currently are like me, or you're in retirement and you did work your butt off your whole life to save and invest and grow some nest egg, some wealth, some money, some assets. And you want that to take care of you. You want that to be your safety net. Maybe you want to pass some of it on to the next generation. And the last thing any of us want is for some lawsuit to land in our lap and end up devastating what we worked so hard to accumulate. I saw a post this morning, somebody who has been it was a short post, but it was just so just gut wrenching. He's like, I've been doing what you're supposed to do. I've been putting money in every month, putting money in and saving and investing and saving and investing and investing, just to wake up one morning and literally after years of doing that, what he felt was like a very, disciplined way to do it, just to wake up one morning and literally be back to square one. And I mean, that's just, it's hard to make up the time that it takes to do this. So protecting what you've built is something I think we all need to know a little bit more about. We get lots of questions about this. We talk about it with a lot of our clients in one form or another. And so this hopefully will kind of give you a good overview of what these things are, the different ways you can protect yourself from those big, ugly, devastating losses. I'm going to take this a bite at a time because obviously I don't know where everybody's starting in your knowledge about this stuff. So I'm going to kind of just do a quick overview and then go into some of the more details. I'm a visual learner, visual teacher, so I'm going to kind of draw a lot as we go. The first thing to know about asset protection is that it is not a one size fits all approach, and it is really not. No good asset protection lawyer should ever tell you this is bulletproof. And the reason for that is because no matter what legal structure you put in place, if you don't operate it and manage it over time with all of the specific particularities that are required, it may not offer that ultimate protection. And so I'm going to talk about how that works and how it can kind of play out. But asset protection should really be approached from the mindset of, if I get sued, I want to end up with as much of what I originally had as possible still. Like, if I have this much when I get sued, I want to end up with all of it or as much of it as possible when that lawsuit is done. Okay. Asset protection it's not really the goal or the mindset of I can do whatever I want and beat any lawsuit and nobody can ever come after me. I'm untouchable. That's not the real mindset of a mature person who's thinking about asset protection. You're thinking about asset protection in a way of, I want to keep my stuff. I want to keep my nest egg. I want to keep my financial security. I want to keep what I've got that I want to pass on to the next generation or whatever. And so the mindset is really to keep what you have. Okay. So here's what we're going to talk about as far as an introduction. So a lot of people who aren't doing anything asset protection wise, they're living their life and they're collecting investments, they're collecting savings, they're collecting maybe rental properties, they're collecting maybe businesses of some kind, and they just continue to add and add and add and add and add and add. And I mean, that's how you build wealth. That's how you build a nest egg, is you continue to save and invest and save and invest. At some point, you wake up and you kind of do a little personal balance sheet and you go, huh, I've got a few $1,000,000. If I add up the value of everything that I've got some wealth, and there it all is. And it sometimes is just sort of spattered around your life in all these different places and all these different pieces, and it hasn't yet been organized into a way that would protect you from a lawsuit. And that's typically what we come across, and that's when a lot of people come to us and say, okay, what do I do now? I want to keep what I've got, but I also don't want to lose it. but I also don't want to give up control of everything because this is my life. This is my money. I want to be able to do what I want to do. And that's basically how it starts is you've just got this stuff spread all around and it works because you're making money, your money is making money, your investments are making money, and it's providing the lifestyle you want. But then now you're starting to think about looking like potentially a target. You're kind of getting a big bullseye on your back, and you might start to look like somebody who's got deep pockets. When that happens, then you're starting to become a risk because lawyers out there know they can file a lawsuit, even if it's pretty dang bogus, just to extract a settlement out of you. And you want to avoid even looking like a target. So what do? A lot of people, the first thing they'll do is they'll set up, and we do this for a lot of people. They'll set up their revocable living trust, and there's a lot of myths and misconceptions about it that trust will actually protect your assets from lawsuits from creditors. And I just want to say right up front, it does not do that. A revocable living trust protects nothing from creditors, from lawsuits. It is just to organize your affairs if you become incapacitated or if you pass away. So that's a lot of times the first step somebody might be thinking they're taking, but it doesn't do that. So what do people do next? A lot of times they'll take their rental properties and they'll put them in an LLC. And absolutely, great step. We recommend it. What we typically recommend if you own multiple pieces of real estate that are being rented out is you put each one into its own LLC. And yep, you form a new one, you form a new one, you form a new one, and you just put them as the owners of those properties. Here's why I like that. So what that does as your first, if that's your first step, is you, instead of something happening on your rental property and them suing you, right? If it's in an LLC, they don't really have grounds to sue you anymore. Okay. They are only going to be able to sue the LLC. And so that brings up what I want to talk about next, which is this concept of containing liability, containing risks. Okay. I refer to this as inside out, outside in, and that's how you contain things. So if you think about what that means, let's say on one of your rental properties, um, a tenant, you know, is cooking in the kitchen, and the kitchen blows up. There was some leaky gas line, and there was something faulty, and it was a problem. Well, they get injured, and they're going to file a lawsuit against the landlord. No question. They're going to find a lawyer who is going to put that lawsuit into place. Well, if you have that entity, if you have that piece of real estate owned by an LLC, it's the LLC that did the renting, that did the management of the property, that did when repairs were needed, that did the maintenance of grounds, that did the anything. And so that LLC is legally a separate entity. It's a separate person than you are. Okay. So they only can file that LLC or that lawsuit against the LLC. And if you've got each of your properties in its own separate LLC, they don't have the ability to file it against your other entities. That's one of the advantages of having separate LLCs for each of your pieces of real estate. So that's what I mean by inside out protection. Whatever that liability is inside this LLC, it can't get out. It tries to get out, but then it can't. Lawyer might try to sue you individually as well or your other entities, but as you present your defense, you're going to get yourself and those other entities dismissed. And even if they do come back with a judgment because of some mistake that happened, some honest mistake that happened, it's going to stay right inside that one LLC. And at worst, you're looking at losing that one piece of property. Okay. So that's inside out protection because of the LLC wrapper. But then think about it from the other direction. You're standing up here, you know, you're cruising around life. You're, doing whatever you do in life. You're driving around and personally, you're on a trip to the grocery store. You accidentally get in a big car accident and it's your fault. Okay. You cause this massive car accident. It's your fault. Crunch, crunch. And the other driver gets injured. That other driver, they are probably going to try to sue you individually. Okay. Obviously, we have insurance, things like that to help cover, which I'll talk about insurance in a second. But from the concept of inside out, outside in protection, if they do get a judgment against you individually for something you personally did, they don't have the ability to file that lawsuit against your LLCs, which again, they are separate because they're separate entities. Now, taking insurance off the table, they get a judgment against you for $1 million. How do they collect that? They do get to go after your assets. So that's how they collect it. And this is where the first layer of asset protection comes in. So this is just the concept of inside out and outside in. So outside liabilities can't get into your LLC protected assets. So let me show you what the layers of asset protection are. The first layer, very first layer, are what we refer to as exempt assets. Okay. Arizona, and every state, but Arizona has in our legal system, in our laws, has very clearly defined lists of assets that creditors, including somebody who tries to sue you or somebody gets a judgment against you, that are exempt from being taken. So even if you lose the lawsuit, the exempt assets under our statutes, they can't touch. It's basically Arizona's policy that says, hey, this stuff, it's exempt. We want to be able to make sure people can't lose at least these things. And so they're exempt from creditors. And so you get these exemptions without having to do anything. You don't have to file a homestead declaration in Arizona. You don't have to declare or strategize to take advantage of these exempt assets. They're just exempt by nature of our laws. So, a couple examples of those: Arizona's exempt homestead exemption this year is now $425,000. You only get to pick one in Arizona. One home has to be your primary residence, basically. But $425,000 of equity in that home is exempt from creditors. So you don't have to do anything to protect that much. Now, if you have more equity, they can get to the additional equity. There's additional exemptions for household belongings, for your wedding ring, for one motor vehicle up to a certain value, for certain tools and equipment that are related to a job, and even all of your horses, your milk cows, and your poultry up to a certain dollar amount. These are examples of exempt property, and you don't have to declare them. You don't have to do anything. They're just exempt by nature of them. There's two others in Arizona that are actually really powerful. And one of them is retirement accounts. So if you have IRAs, 401ks, things that are tax deferred qualified retirement accounts, Arizona exempts those as long as you don't take a distribution. If you take a distribution because you're at the stage where you're forced to take an RMD, a distribution is no longer exempt, but the account is exempt. The other one that's pretty powerful in Arizona is the cash value of life insurance policies. And sometimes people do put money into life insurance policies that have a death benefit, but also have cash value. That cash value, if it's been sitting there for 2 years, then it's exempt from creditors. So those are just all the exempt assets. That's the first layer of asset protection. Second layer is insurance. It's not setting up an LLC. It's not doing anything else. It is insurance. I'm a big fan of making sure you are properly insured before you start worrying about LLCs and other structures. The reason is for, well, two things. First, insurance companies, if it's a covered loss, they're going to pay for your lawyer to defend you. And none of us want to have to fork money out to a lawyer to defend us when we're in the right, you know? So your insurance company is going to pay for that lawyer to defend you, which is great. The other reason I like insurance policies is because, like I said from the beginning, the mindset of asset protection. You've got all your stuff. If a problem happens, you want to make sure you end up with as much as possible. Well, if you get sued in there, your insurance company, if it's a covered loss and it's within the policy limits, they're going to try to negotiate some kind of settlement that they pay. And then that gets you out of it with all of your stuff still intact. So I really like to make sure that that next layer is insurance, that you're properly insured. Obviously, home, auto. If you're in any kind of profession, you have professional coverage, business coverage, an umbrella policy. All of these things stack up to give you a pretty good comprehensive policy. If you own rental properties, you can buy landlords insurance. All of these things help to make sure if you do get sued, you can walk away without having to, maybe you have a deductible, but really very little money out of pocket, completely resolve the issue and walk away scot-free. Okay. So that's why insurance is the second layer. The third layer is where you start to get into LLCs and maybe even some kinds of irrevocable trusts. Okay. I'll go over those. Fourth, you're starting to look at, and these are all done in Arizona. Fourth, you're starting to look at Nevada, Delaware, Wyoming, South Dakota. You're starting to look at other states' laws to use their LLC laws, limited partnership laws, trust laws, because some other states have different levels of protection. They have different types of court systems. They have different types of taxation. And so once you start to get up to this level, you're comparing all these things. Which one is going to be the most advantageous for me to protect my assets using some of these structures and strategies? And the fifth level is where you're looking at offshore plans, offshore entities. And you're looking at the Cayman Islands, the Cook Islands. I've even seen some more recent attorneys starting to talk about the island of Nevis. It's out in the Caribbean, tiny little island, but they're starting to really attract some offshore planning. Obviously, very sophisticated, very complicated, pretty expensive, and you're giving up a lot of control to get the types of benefits that come with that fifth level of planning. These are layers that you add one at a time. You don't typically skip and go from 1 to 5 or 2 to 4. You're typically building on these one at a time because they get more complex, they get more expensive, more sophisticated, and you're giving up more and more control of your assets as you move up through these layers. So you do typically progress through these layer by layer. And that's the that's the mindset of asset protection, is you add layers of protection. Because if you think about it, if and I know plenty of lawyers who do that other kind of work where they go around suing people, right? Or suing businesses or whatever. If you're that kind of lawyer and a client comes to you and says, "Hey, this big thing happened. I think they should pay blah, 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 blah for my damages." Every lawyer who takes on those kinds of cases, they do a pretty thorough case evaluation for two things. Number one, how hard is it going to be to prove liability? That really, truthfully, the other side did something wrong, right? Or was negligent. How hard is it going to be to prove that? And number two, how hard is it going to be to collect a judgment? Okay. Because if you think about it, even if liability is easy, it's going to be a slam dunk case. If the other side has no money, lawyers aren't going to take those cases. And they're just not. They're not going to put in a year, 2 years, 3 years of work on a case where they can get a $10 million judgment, but the other side has no way to pay it. It's a pointless effort. The other thing that they're looking at as far as collectability is this kind of stuff. Okay, they're going to do their search through all the records and databases that they have access to try to see if they can figure out what the defendant owns and how rich are they? How much money do they have? And if it looks like, I don't even know, like maybe they've got, I can tell they own this one thing over here, but I can't really tell what they own anywhere else. It's going to discourage lawyers from even taking that case in the first place. And while you can't use these layers of asset protection to completely hide and go completely anonymous, you can make it harder to find, right? And that's an important strategy when it comes to, do I look like I have a big target on my back, right? You don't want to look like you have deep pockets. You want to look like somebody who's, the normal person next door. And if you can create that impression up front, those lawyers are going to evaluate the case and they're going to say, gosh, this just, I don't know. I don't know if I'll be able to collect this. It just looks too hard, and they'll pass. Well, the person goes to another lawyer. They do the same thing. They go, oh, this looks like it's going to be too pain in the butt. I'm going to pass. If enough lawyers just decline, then you've basically used these layers to your advantage. So layering is always how you start. You make sure you've got your exempt stuff, you make sure you've got your insurance, and then you start questioning, what are the layers I need on top of that? Okay. I see a couple questions come in. Let me pause and grab those. Can you put property in an LLC if it has a mortgage? Yeah, great question. A lot of properties have mortgages, residential rental properties, commercial real estate has a mortgage on it. Almost all of those mortgages are going to have something called a due on sale clause in that mortgage that says, if you sell this property, you need to pay us the full balance. And that's why when it goes through escrow, through title company, they pay off the old mortgage and the new person buys it free and clear. But when you are the owner of a rental property with a mortgage, okay, and you want to put this into an LLC, typically what's going to happen is you bought it with a mortgage and the mortgage is recorded at the recorder's office, and you also have recorded the title of the house in your name. The mortgage company, most mortgage companies do not continuously monitor the recorder's office for changes in title. Okay. So if you bought a rental property, it's in your name, you got a mortgage, and then you're like, oh wait, I'm married. I want to put this property in the name of me and my wife. So you get the deed prepared, and it's from you to you and your spouse. They're not going to see that. They're not going to trigger anything on that. And as long as the mortgage keeps getting paid, generally nothing's going to happen. If you also do that into an LLC, generally nothing's going to happen. Now, under a lot of those due on sale clauses, arguably that transfer into an LLC could be construed to trigger that due on sale clause. It very well might trigger that due on sale clause, but the mortgage company has to step up and say, we see you transferred the real estate into an LLC. You have 30 days to pay off the mortgage. But what they'll also do is they'll say, or cure this issue. And so it's very easy to cure that. You just transfer it back into your individual name, and then it's done. Between our office and all the other attorneys I know in Arizona who do this kind of work, and this probably encompasses tens of thousands of LLCs and moving rental properties title from the individual into their LLC, we have yet to hear of a mortgage company that has triggered a due on sale clause in that scenario. So we feel like the risk is pretty low. And with that caveat that they might trigger it, we still recommend doing it, obviously with the understanding that it could trigger the due on sale clause. And so in practice, though, we don't see that happening in Arizona. There's another question there that says, do you put the LLC inside your revocable living trust? Yeah, absolutely. And I'll show you that in this structure that we talk about first. Can lawyers find out how much you have in bank accounts? They can if they have a judgment against you. Once a lawsuit, if you lose a lawsuit and the jury awards $1 million judgment against you, then it goes into the collection proceedings. And in that point, what generally can happen is the lawyer has another court hearing, puts you on the stand and says, tell me all your assets. And you're under oath. You're going to have to itemize. I bank here. I've got investment accounts here. I've got these LLCs. I've got these trusts. I've got all of this, all of this, all of this. You're under oath, which in Arizona comes with a perjury criminal penalty if you lie under oath. So there's no reason to go to jail in that scenario. And so, yeah, there's a few cases out there where people were in that scenario. They lied under oath and they got put in jail. And the judge basically says, you're going to jail until you disclose all of your assets. And I would rather not sit in jail. So, that would be how they would find out. So, yeah, they can definitely find out. So, structure. And to go to that question about putting your LLC in your trust. So, typical first layer structure is you're setting up your revocable living trust. And without anything else, we always tell clients you want to make sure you fund your trust with everything, your bank accounts, your investments, your LLCs, your business, your everything. You're just going to make everything owned by your trust. And so essentially under your revocable living trust, you'll have all of your stuff, your bank accounts where you do your normal bills, your savings, your brokerage accounts, any stocks, any LLCs, even your cars, your personal property, your gold, silver, all that stuff. It's all going to be owned under the name of your RLT. This is where I'm going to go to the next level today. As you see in this structure, the inside out issue, if you have your LLC here and you have some type of judgment against you, or I'm sorry, against the LLC, it's not going to be able to get out of your LLC if this has all been done correctly. And so if the judgment was for $1 million, but the rental property is only worth $500,000, they will force the sale. Your LLC will basically declare bankruptcy, and then the rest of it is gone. It doesn't come out of the LLC towards your other assets. But what happens if you have multiple properties and you have multiple businesses? Well, your revocable living trust is still going to kind of be that master top entity. And you're still going to have it own your bank accounts, your savings, your brokerage, and all those other things over here. But what we put in place in between your RLT and your different LLCs is we'll generally put a master LLC of some kind. And here's why. Again, well, it's basically another layer. Okay. It then owns your various LLCs, and it's got now a layer between all of those and your personal assets. So something happens in one of your LLCs, again, you might lose that one, but it's not going to go anywhere. If some chance they are able to pierce the corporate veil because corporate structures and corporate formalities weren't followed exactly, they're only going to be able to pierce it up into that one. Okay. And so again, you're creating that shield between all of this stuff and all your other personal assets. The other structure that I really like is instead of creating a master LLC entity, you're going to have all your LLCs owning your rental properties over here individually. They own the real estate. Okay. They own the real estate, but that's all they do. They don't manage the rentals, they don't collect rent, they don't interface with the tenants. Okay. They just own the real estate. You have another entity over here that is your manager. That one is basically a property management company. Okay. Separate entity. It doesn't own any real estate. It is just a property management company. And so your tenants, they're paying rent to this entity. This entity is taking care of all of the repairs, all of the bills that are happening on each of these properties. Again, just think about how a property management company would do it. They're finding tenants, they're vetting them, they're signing leases with them, and they're doing all that management work. Okay. The only asset that this entity owns is a checking account. Rent comes in, expenses go out. Rent comes in, expenses go out. Rent comes in, expenses go out. At some periodic basis, that checking account is building up a larger and larger balance. Either you, your trust, or some other entity in between things, it will then distribute out its profit on a quarterly basis, an annual basis, a monthly basis, whatever you want it to do. It's going to make those distributions with the idea that this checking account is not building up a lot of value. It's just really a flow through. It's keeping just enough of a reserve to operate and do what it needs to do. It is not building up a lot of money. Okay. It's distributing out its profit as you deem necessary. Okay. So you think about that entity, it is just really a flow through entity. But if there's a problem, something happens on one of these rental properties, somebody slips and falls, somebody, God forbid, drowns in a pool. Guess what? The owner of the entity wasn't responsible for managing it, wasn't responsible for maintaining it, wasn't responsible for doing any of that. The management entity was responsible for it. And so that problem, they're going to sue this management entity. Any lawyer is also going to try to sue the ownership entity, but you'll be able to work to get them dismissed because they had no involvement in it. And it'll just be the management entity that has some potential liability. Obviously, you're going to have insurance over here for management liability, and you're going to have umbrella insurance on all your stuff over here. And so hopefully that resolves the issue completely. But they come after this entity, even if they come after this entity and they bankrupt this entity completely, it only had a small amount in its checking account. It didn't carry a big amount of money here. And so you kind of go, well, I guess that entity's bankrupt, close that one down. And now all my properties need a new management company. You restart. Okay. You get a new management company going. It starts up and it takes over all the management of all your real estate. A couple questions I want to look at real quick. I know we've been getting them in here. Does blanket liability insurance cover properties and all the LLCs? Generally, yes, but you're going to work with your insurance agent to absolutely dive into that question, show them what you have, show them how everything is structured, and make sure things are insured properly for the things you want to cover. Can your management LLC contract out management to a property management company? Yep, absolutely. Your management LLC can do anything. It can hire a management company. It could even hire, if you have a son, daughter, family member who is a real estate agent and they do property management, you can hire them and have them take over. And as part of that contract, they're going to agree to indemnify your company from management liability and management risk. So yes, any of those contracts can. Just like as you, the owner of these entities, would hire this entity to manage your rentals, part of that contract is going to say this management company indemnifies the owner, each one of these, from management liabilities on the property. And so this entity can take all the liability. If you hire a third party to do it, you can sign a contract that says they take the liability. I assume each LLC needs its own bank account, correct? How does an LLC get a credit card for expenses? So one little thing about this, if these LLCs only own a piece of real estate, they don't need a bank account. They don't. They're not receiving money. They're not paying expenses. They're not doing anything. They literally just hold an asset with the purpose of it growing in value. And so someday, if you sell one of these, yes, a check is going to be made out to that LLC name. And yes, you're going to need a bank account. But while you're owning them and renting them out, they don't need bank accounts. This management company has one bank account to operate all of the financials for rent and expenses. Okay. And getting a credit card for an LLC, you just go to the bank. They'll ask for whatever they ask for, and you say, hey, I've got this LLC and here's what it does, and blah, 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 blah. Can I apply for a credit card? And if you have a relationship with them and you've done business with them on other things, generally they'll approve you at least for some minimum balance that you can use. And that credit card, again, will just be tied to that management entity. Each LLC owns single rental and not in need of bank account. What about taxes? So for tax purposes, generally speaking, this kind of structure is going to be completely disregarded as a pass-through tax structure. So all of this financial activity that's happening here is happening in this one checking account, and you're doing your bookkeeping and end of year reporting on just that one checking account. And usually that's going to flow through to your Schedule E on your personal tax return. Generally speaking, that's how a lot of people's rental properties are reported already. And it'll just be a new Schedule E under the name of this management entity. And that's where it'll show that. All of these, because they're owned by individual LLCs, those individual LLCs are either owned by a sub entity or they're owned by your revocable living trust. They're going to have their own depreciation schedule under those LLC names. But again, it's just going to be all pass through on your individual tax return. Okay, let me show you guys before I run out of time one more piece to this structure that can be very helpful. I'm just going to get rid of a couple of these things to give me some room. Okay, so keeping that that structure over here on the right, keeping that in place, you've got this management entity, you've got these ownership entities. You might add, let me get rid of this box. You might add, and then let me actually get rid of these. You might add something here, like a family limited partnership plus an irrevocable trust if you want even more protection. So I really like this whole structure over here as a standard setup for when you own multiple pieces of real estate. What changes with a irrevocable trust and a family limited partnership is the family limited partnership is and has the ability to own a lot of your individual personal assets and give you some asset protection around them. You might put your brokerage account in here. You might put stock you hold. You might put other businesses. You might put car collection. You might put gold. You might put even your significant savings in there. And that family limited partnership has two parties that are involved with it. Just like an LLC does, it has a member who's the owner and it has a manager who's the operator. Family limited partnership has similar positions. It has the general partner who is in charge of operations and doing things, and it has limited partners who are just passive and they just get the benefits. They have no liability for what happens in there. The reason we do an irrevocable trust here is we usually set that irrevocable trust as the general partner of the family limited partnership, and we set your revocable living trust as the limited partner. Okay, it's very similar how this side is set up for your rental properties. So you've got ownership and the value, the equity going up this way, but you've got liability and responsibility and operations over on this side. And generally recommend an irrevocable trust because an irrevocable trust can be set up again to have very little by way of assets. It's not really owning much. That's not where the value is being built up, but it's set up so that your family limited partnership is giving liability to something else that isn't you, the individual. Okay. We don't want you to have liability or risk. We want as much as possible to take you individually off of the plate of management responsibility for as many of your assets as possible. And this is a structure to do that. The trust is the general partner and it's directing actions. And if something happens, then that's the entity that gets sued. And again, it doesn't really own anything. It's just a minimal bank account. That money comes in and goes out because as it comes in, it goes out to the limited partners. Now, usually you're going to have 1% of the equity stay there. But if you lose 1%, you kind of go big deal, right? And so then you might add these ownerships under your family limited partnership and even the management entity under your family limited partnership. This would be a pretty sophisticated structure because it does add more bookkeeping. You've got bookkeeping now here, and you've got bookkeeping now here. And most of us don't do bookkeeping for our personal life like you would be required to do in this structure. It has to be done professionally. It has to follow generally accepted accounting principles. And if you're not willing to invest in that type of bookkeeping, that's where these structures completely fail when they end up in a lawsuit. Because they end up in a lawsuit and the lawyer shows the court, hey, look, they've just been operating this thing as their left pocket, right pocket, like they always did. They didn't follow corporate formalities, and the court's going to say, yep, you can pierce the corporate veil. And then you're basically out of luck. The structure doesn't protect you at all. So while it is more complex, as you build wealth, getting the management and control off of you individually is how you build these layers and is how you put disincentives to those plaintiffs' lawyers from thinking you've got a big target and deep pockets. All right. Those were the biggest topics I wanted to cover. We've got a few minutes for questions. Before I dive into questions, I do just want to make sure and tell you guys that two quick housekeeping announcements. The first one is that on October 24th is my next webinar. That one's not going to be recorded because on that one, I'm going to be doing just a very practical workshop walkthrough live with people who want help making decisions about how to set up their will and their trust for the first time. And so it's going to be just a very practical workshop. People are going to be asking questions, going back and forth, and it's not something that can be done on a recording at all very well. And so if you want to sign up for that one, then I'm going to post that link right here, and you can sign up, or if you know somebody who wants to, you can sign up for that one. And then if something I talked about today sparked a curiosity for you and you're like, this maybe makes sense, I'm not sure, I'm interested in maybe that piece and how it would work for me, I do free 15-minute phone calls for anybody who attends these webinars. And so you can schedule a call with me at this link that I'm posting, and you just find a time on my calendar, schedule it. Happy to jump on that call. We'll talk through your individual situation, and I'll give you absolutely any information that I possibly can. All right, couple questions. Let's see. At what level of wealth would you consider the irrevocable trust setup? Generally speaking, it's, we're looking at 3 million plus. Some clients, they've got 10 million and they're like, nah, not interested. But if the cost of the asset protection plan is going to be maybe 0.5% or 1% of your wealth, that's generally where I'm thinking it makes sense. Most of the investment is a one-time cost, and then you're looking at some fraction of that on an annual basis to keep it maintained properly. But that's generally where I start to think it makes sense. What would you expect to spend to set up a manager LLC and 5 property LLCs? Generally these things for us start at about 10 grand. I think the last one I did for somebody that had about 5. Now they had more than 5. It was probably about 16 or 17 grand or something like that. It was a little bit, there was some nuances to it that were pretty interesting. But if you want to jump on a call, I can give you a specific quote on what it might look like for you. And then I see we've got a hand raised. Jim, let me give you, all you got to do, Jim, is turn on your microphone and ask away.
Yeah, thanks. I just have a question. So I understand the homestead that protects like 430,000 of equity and the rest of that can go. But if you have, say, a second home, 2 homes, and you have a lot more equity than that in both of those homes, would you recommend putting the second home into an LLC to protect that from some sort of personal lawsuit? Or what about even your own residential house? So in other words, if your house has a whole lot more equity than the 430 that you want to protect, how would you set that up? And does that just get really clumsy with taxes? Is that the main reason you wouldn't do that? It's more of a tax issue than, actually protection?
Yeah, issues on primary homes are one of the first things to think about when you start looking at protecting the rest of the equity. There's a couple, one of the simplest ways to protect equity in homes is to go get the biggest line of credit you can from a bank. Literally, just the biggest line of credit that you can, but don't use it, because on the public record, it's going to show the full balance of that line of credit. And so, while that's not a surefire way to protect your equity, it is a good thing to have on the public record, because again, people who might want to sue you are going to see, oh my gosh, they're leveraged to the hilt. This is going to, there's not going to be any money to collect. And so it might discourage lawsuits. There's a couple other ways you can protect equity in primary home, vacation home, second homes, through the use of trusts. Generally, some irrevocable trusts can be used to still preserve tax exemptions and some of the other tax benefits we get on our primary and even secondary homes. But again, though, they do come with, everything comes with pros and cons. And so if you want to jump on a call, I can go through those with you and kind of teach you a little bit more about them.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Any other questions? If not, in the chat are those two links for the next workshop on October 24th. If you know anybody who needs to set up a will or a trust, I would highly recommend you send that to them. Even if they're, a family that's just young and starting out and they don't know what to do with all this stuff, naming guardians for little kids or any age, somebody needs to do this. Have them jump on that webinar. I'm going to walk through, here's how you make the decisions for your guardians, your power of attorney, your beneficiaries, your trustee, and just work right through it. They'll get a worksheet. They can take notes and help them just think about all that stuff. And schedule a call with me. Like I said, no cost, no catch, just a quick conversation to see if something has sparked an interest in what we talked about today. And I'm happy to just dive into it a little bit more with you one-on-one. All right, that is all the time we had for today. Thank you for coming, everybody. I hope this was helpful. Jump over to our YouTube channel as well. Look at our other topics. Or if you want to watch the replay for this one, it takes us about a week to get these up. And you can and catch this again. Thanks again, guys. Great to see everybody here.